Do you find parts of the Bible to be irrelevant? Or have you read passages in the Bible that you came away from and you felt like that has absolutely nothing to do with my life? Well, if you have, welcome to the YWAM Kansas City podcast. Sorry, I messed that up. I am so glad you're here because today we're going to talk about that. My name is LaTeisha. I'm currently in the School of Biblical Studies, we call it the SBS, and it is this cool 9-month school in which you get to go through every book of the Bible inductively. So
It's a cool school.
Yeah, it's a cool school. It is a cool school, and I am a champion for the School of Biblical Studies. I hope you're seeing that if you're watching this podcast and you've been watching just the different episodes we've done here on the YWAM Kansas City podcast. Got it right that time, Phil.
You did.
So if you're watching, yeah, we're excited about what God is doing in this school. I'm excited, and I'm excited to share. And before I get into this topic of like irrelevant parts of the Bible and just to wrestle with that, I just want to give you a little personal update of what's been going on in my experience in the School of Biblical Studies. Right now, we are in the prophets. We've finally made it to the prophets in this quarter. And these are books that, if we're honest, most Christians spend the least amount of time in these prophetic books. So I'm talking about Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Zechariah, Malachi, maybe some time in Isaiah we spend, right? Different favorite passages like Isaiah 53, things like that.
Have you been watching me with my quiet times?
Maybe the Lord is saying something. But to be honest, even for me, this is the section in the Bible, the prophetic books, that I too have spent the least amount of time studying and meditating on. And I think I'm very much like you, those who are watching who feel that sense of, I really don't spend a lot of time in the prophets. And I've been thinking recently about why we don't. Why is it that this is, not something we're all familiar with? And I think it's because of how these messages are presented to us. It's so easy in these prophetic books with all that is happening in the book to just get lost. And you're like, I don't even know what is happening. It just feels like doom and gloom everywhere I turn. Everything is bad. I don't know what this is even talking about. And I've been there. Like, I remember actually my first kind of experience with reading the prophets when I was reading the Bible, kind of just getting to understand the Bible for the first time. And I didn't get it. I'm so lost as to what's going on here. And you almost just want to plow through, right? Till you get to something familiar. And you just go, most of this doesn't seem to even connect with me in my experience. And something I'm loving right now in the School of Biblical Studies with the prophets is that it is allowing for even greater clarity to go into those passages that used to seem a little, whoa, I don't know what's going on, or I'm just going from familiar section to familiar section in that book to going, I can see the whole of this message and what this prophet is trying to say. And the blessing that in the SBS and the way that they've set things up with these, the lectures we do and the structure we use just allows you to look at that book and say, all right, I know what time this was written in. I understand the context around what this book was written. And I can even see the structure that this author is using to frame his message. And once you've done all that, now you get the opportunity to just delve deep into what is the message itself. And so I'm loving that, honestly. I've been reading through, we just finished Isaiah last week, Isaiah week. Man, 66 chapters. It takes a long time. Phil, you read through Isaiah?
I have. I'm not gonna lie. I spend most of my time in like 40 through 66.
Yeah, I get that. Most people do.
But I can totally relate to you what you're talking about, because when I'm in the prophets, it I feel like the reason I would read the prophets is because I feel like I should. Like I shouldn't ignore a part of the Bible. But you're so right. When I'm there, even in Isaiah, which is an amazing book, I find so many of the chapters just so hard to figure out what to do with them. How does this
Yeah.
relate to me? Like, what does this mean? Like, all of this stuff about Cush and Egypt and Moab, and like, I'm just like, I don't know what to do with all of this.
Yeah, it's filled with language, descriptions, locations, peoples that, you know, coming to it, it can feel like, what do I even do with this? What's going on? And it's easy to get lost. So I've been there, and what's exciting in this season, and I feel like there's so much more clarity I'm getting. And it allows for greater understanding of God's heart in each message from each prophet. Even when they have the same audience, God can frame the messages he wants to give in different time periods to different prophets to communicate to his people. And so it's so beautiful, and I'm just loving it in this season, just going through these prophetic books. And the doom and gloom is not so doom and gloom when we're able to see the Lord's heart and what he's doing and what he's saying. So I just feel that personally in my life, just being kind of just overwhelmed in a good way with God's mercy and his grace all throughout these prophetic books that do deal a lot with God's judgments, but also with restoration. So that's how I'm doing. And as you can probably tell, I'm enjoying these prophetic books. But with the prophets, as with other places in the Bible, there are things we come across that seem irrelevant, that like locations, that you just go, what's the point of that? That doesn't seem to apply to my life. I can just move on to the next thing. And as we read the Bible and we see all these things, we have a choice as to what we're going to do with it. Like when you read through and you see something that seems like it has no connection with your life, how are you going to respond to that? Just to give some examples, what are those things, right? I'm talking about things that are irrelevant that come up in the Bible when we're reading or seem irrelevant. Locations, as we just mentioned. And location, for instance, Mount Gerizim. That's a location in the Bible that actually has a lot of significance. But if you're just reading and you see that and you don't know that, you can be like, oh, what do I care about Mount Gerizim? Then there's also things like nations. Nineveh, is a nation that comes up in the Bible and has significance. There's customs like, foot washing comes up in the Bible, and we can see these customs, these cultural things, locations and nations, and we can go, I'm just going to get through and plow through. Or we can respond and go, what do I do with what doesn't seem to connect with me? In the SBS method, we have a unique step in the method that helps us bring what is kind of removed from us culturally by time, and bring it into a place where we can actually have an understanding and begin to apply it to our lives in a personal way. And we call that the timeless truth. The timeless truth. What is a timeless truth? A timeless truth is when you have a principle or a truth that actually transcends history and culture. That means that this is true in every time for every people. No matter who you are, no matter where you live, in any generation, this is applicable. This is true. Now, when it comes to the Bible, primarily the timeless truths that we're going to get are about the Lord, right? Because God is the one who is unchanging. So a lot of what we come away from in the scriptures, even when we're peering at these locations and nations and customs that are different from us, a lot of the timeless truths that we're going to come away with are things that we understand begin to understand about God's nature and his character, because he doesn't change. And he is the truth that we learn about him can be applied to any, time in history. To any people can take that and apply it, because it's truth about God. So that's the cool thing about a timeless truth, is through meditating on a passage and observing and interpreting it well, we're able to take away from it truth about God and his character, his nature, and then begin to live a certain way based on that truth, and begin to interact with passages of the Bible that you maybe would have I just would have normally skipped past that, right? I would have normally just gone, I don't even need to focus on that because it's not that big a deal to my life, to actually seeing beauty in passages that, you would have previously overlooked. So what I want to do is kind of bring you into my process of this, because I'm on the journey, and with the timeless truths I've been doing, it's been really impactful for me, because some of them, when you get to that stage in the process, and it's towards the end of our steps in the SBS method, it can just impact your heart in such a profound way because of the beauty that you discover of who God is in that passage. So I want to take you a little bit on the journey with me of my process to getting to a timeless truth in a passage, and how that timeless truth impacted me concerning who God is. So if you have a Bible, Phil, you got a Bible?
I got my phone.
There you go. If you have a phone, let's go to Genesis 3, verse 9. And I want to talk you through kind of just how to get to a timeless truth, and how I did it kind of through the SBS method. So in Genesis 3, verse 9, we see God asking Adam and Eve a question. He says, "Where are you?" And as I was reading through the Genesis, man, this was week 1. So we were like, really, it's been a long time. But when I was reading through this passage in Genesis and I observed this question, I wanted to ask, okay, why, what is the significance of this question? Why is God asking them this question? So I made this observation, and it moved me into a place of interpretation. How do I understand what is God saying through this passage to them? And that's actually going to move me into the timeless truth. But I looked at this and I'm like, it's so easy with this passage. Many of us has read it, a lot of believers, right? We've all read Genesis 1 through 3. And, I think in the long read through the Bible programs, we definitely make it through Genesis. I think we start getting it's around Leviticus and Numbers that we start struggling. But everybody reads Genesis, right? In their
You
read
are
through the
watching
Bible.
me during my quiet time. Stop being so personal, LaTeisha.
So we definitely get through this. So I know you've probably read this. And when I saw this question, I was like, man, I really want to go deeper into this question. Lord, what is it that you're saying here? Why are you asking this question? Because otherwise I normally would just overlook it. So as I meditated on this, what I see is in Genesis 2:15, we see the Lord, he is placed man in the garden. He placed him in the garden, and he gave the responsibility to work it, to keep it. That was the role. So in the garden, there's this responsibility that man had to just interact with God in keeping this garden, naming the animals, having this responsibility and this daily interaction with God. In the garden, there's this fellowship that took place between Adam and the Lord in the garden. And as Adam is working, he is working with God and he's walking with God. God comes to meet him in the cool of the day, and they have this relationship of just talking together and working together as God has given him this responsibility. And what I saw is when the Lord is asking him, "Where are you?" Why is God asking this question? Well, surely God doesn't think that he can't find Adam, and God's like, where are you? I don't know where you are. I can't see you, right? We know that God can see everything. The question isn't for God. So that's the first thing that you see, right? God is not asking this because he literally can't find Adam and Eve, and he's like, I don't know where you guys are. Tell me where you are. There's something else going on here. And what I saw from this is God is indicating to them that something is wrong in this situation. You are hiding when normally when God came to the garden in the cool of the day, that was fellowship time. That was time to work together and fellowship together. And now when God comes, Adam's not there. What the normal way of life has been interrupted by something. And now God is telling Adam and Eve, where are you? What happened, essentially? Because this is not the norm to our relationship. And it gave the man and the woman this understanding that something was wrong. That's what the question did. So that's kind of what I came away with from my interpretation of this and looking at this passage. And the timeless truth, the principle, right? We're looking at what is the principle that we can gain from this, that we can then apply to our lives. And that is, I came up with this principle or timeless truth, and I really liked it. It's working and walking with God is the norm. Working and walking with God is the norm. And that is simply like revealing through that passage, that timeless truth just shows like no matter what time in history, no matter what culture, no matter where you are, it is true that for humanity, it is the norm. It's supposed to be the norm that we talk to God and that we walk with God. And anything else that is not talking with God and walking with God is actually what's odd and strange and not the norm, right? So that was my timeless truth that I came to from this passage, and allowed me to go, okay, now what do I do with this timeless truth? This is what I see happening here, and this is a principle here. And that just leads you into the next step, which is application, which we won't get into today because we're going to talk about that on another podcast. But it just allows you to be able to see something that maybe you would have overlooked, that question before. Oh, God asked them, where are you? But actually in that question, taking it through that process, we're able to see a truth about God, that for our lives, he's designed us to have normal life being walking with him and talking with him. And I think that's pretty amazing. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, man, I'm just sitting here thinking about it, and it's such a simple but obvious truth that we see here in this passage, and it's right there in that question, where are you? Like, there's a need for a question because the way God created us to operate, we're no longer there. And so that question then becomes the right response to something's broken. And so, yeah, wow. I'm kind of like, I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Yeah, it was definitely one that I had to sit on and continue to go back to in my own heart of like, man, Lord, this is the norm. Like, I don't want to see any day, like, I don't want to live any day where I'm not living in the norm, right? Like, this is the norm for us. And I'm like, I want to live in what you call normal, which is walking and talking with you.
Yeah, and even God's response to that, I'm just thinking about this. His response is like still interested in us. Like he's still looking for us, and he's like, I want that connection still. Where are you? Like what, he's highlighting this brokenness because, what we see in the story obviously unfolding is he wants that connection to be restored.
Mm-hmm. So there's so much that we can obviously see of truth of who God is, his character and his nature, simply by looking at something that maybe initially felt like an irrelevant thing. Like, why is this, here? Does this connect with my life at all? And there's so many other places in the Bible that we can pause like this and ask questions through that observation and see, what does this passage mean, and bring us into a place of being able to see what is the principle and the truth of God and his character and nature that transcends time that is in this passage. And from there, I mean, it transforms our heart and our life. Like, as we meditate on truth about God and his nature and his character, we're changed. So I pray that this really blessed you today, and that you feel equipped to actually go to those passages, even those genealogies and those laws that, seem weird and just outdated, and begin to go on a journey asking God, like, what is true about you here? What is this saying about your character and nature? Because there's so much of who he is in it, because it's his word. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening today to the podcast. If you enjoyed this, we want you to subscribe, like, share this with someone else, and we look forward to you coming back again and joining us for another podcast.